Ladies and gentlemen of the media, members of the Financial Service Advisory Committee and Delivery Unit, all invited guests, good morning. On March 12, 2015, I laid a report in the BVI House of Assembly entitled Building on a Thriving and Sustainable Financial Services Sector in the British Virgin Islands. At that time, I explained that my government commissioned the internationally respected consulting firm of McKinsey and Company to develop a pragmatic strategy and implementation plan that would chart a new direction for financial services industry. This was in direct response to the challenges threatening our core financial services businesses, rising international pressures, and growing competition. I'm pleased today to share a copy of this report with you and set out how my government will implement its recommendations, which are critical to the future of this industry and our territory. I should also mention at this time that copies of the report are available from the Premier's office and will be posted to the government's website. I'd like to spend a few minutes explaining how we'll be implementing the recommendations set out in the report. As I explained in the House of Assembly, 10 top priority initiatives were agreed for timely implementation from among 40 initiatives identified to further develop and enhance the BVI financial services industry. The report recommended that each of the 10 priority areas should have a sponsor. That is someone at the senior level who is responsible and accountable for developing the specific plans and identifying the actions required to implement each priority initiative. Some of those sponsors are here with us this morning and will be able to answer questions you have during the question and answer period. Let me briefly summarize the 10 initiatives and introduce you to the respective sponsors. The first initiative is to revamp the International Finance Center and make it a focused, highly skilled unit that operates in line with international best practice. You will be aware that we have already rebranded the IFC to BVI Finance and are well on the way with this initiative, with other measures already underway. The Permanent Secretary, Mr. Project Penn, is the sponsor of this initiative. The second initiative is to build on the strength of the Financial Services Commission by strengthening the service culture and organization to improve process transparency, response time, and help provided to customers. The Managing Director of the FSC, Mr. Robert McTavish, is the sponsor of this initiative. The third initiative is to offer value-added services to our product offering by identifying and incentivizing top priority companies to attract those services to the jurisdiction in collaboration with the private sector. Mr. Neil Smith, the Financial Secretary, is the sponsor for this initiative. The fourth initiative on immigration seeks to bring immigration and labor policies and processes in line with international best practice to attract and retain the necessary skilled labor that will be needed to broaden and sustain a substantive offering. Attorney General Jerry Ferrara Kerins is the sponsor of this initiative. The fifth initiative seeks to build local capability and talent by strengthening education at the secondary and tertiary levels, developing the Financial Services Institute, and overhauling internships and scholarship programs to bolster BVI Islander talent, to sustain the industry in the long term, and create opportunities for BVI Islanders. Lorna Smith, Chair of the Financial Services Business Development Committee, is the sponsor of this initiative. The sixth initiative on business development is to establish dedicated business development capability to generate new product and customer ideas and strengthen the mandate of the Financial Services Business Development Committee. Permanent Secretary Mr. Project Penn is the sponsor of this initiative. The seventh initiative focuses on infrastructure and is to help accelerate critical infrastructure projects such as telecommunications and transportation needed to support the development of the economy. Financial Secretary Mr. Neil Smith is the sponsor of this initiative. The eighth initiative to engage the population is to identify current perceptions of financial services and educate and build awareness and understanding of the importance of financial services to the BVI, its impact on our daily lives, and its critical role in transforming the prosperity of the territory. Ms. Lorna Smith is the sponsor of this initiative. The ninth initiative on tax initiatives is to roll out FATCA requirements and lobby funds and the OECD to improve compliance ratings and the jurisdiction's reputation in the international financial services. Mr. Neil Smith is the sponsor of this initiative. The 10th initiative is to establish a dedicated unit staffed by world-class talent reporting at the highest level of government to coordinate and drive implementation of the report's recommendations across the financial services sector. Mr. Broderick Penn is the sponsor of this initiative. As I mentioned before, the sponsors present will be able to answer questions you have regarding initiatives for which they are responsible. I mentioned that Initiative 10 is the establishment of a dedicated unit to drive the implementation of the recommendations of the report. This is perhaps one of the most critical recommendations, as it has responsibility for overseeing the execution of the others. To initiate this recommendation, my government has established the Financial Services Implementation Unit under the Premier's office. This unit will be overseen by a steering committee chaired by myself as Premier and will report directly to the Cabinet. The steering committee will consist of the initiative sponsors I've mentioned before, Mr. Neil Smith, Mr. Broderick Penn, Mr. Jared Farrow, Mr. Lorna Smith, Mr. Robert McTavish, Mr. Humphrey Liu, and Mr. Michael Regals, all experienced and highly skilled persons in the financial services area. The unit will be staffed by 6 talented professionals and specialists dedicated to the efficient implementation of the output of the various initiatives led by the sponsors. The unit will need a strong strategic experience and dedicated manager to lead the implementation of the plans submitted by the sponsors. And I think I've found such a person in Mr. Kedrick Malone, and I'm pleased to announce that he will be heading up the Financial Services Implementation Unit. I'll formally introduce Mr. Malone shortly and ask him to say a few words. My government highly values the work Mr. Malone has started at BVI Finance in helping to set it on a new path. I will ensure that there is continuity for that important agency of the financial services family. I'm therefore pleased to announce today that Mr. Julian Johnson, right here, currently the Chief Operating Officer of the Financial Investigation Agency, will assume the role of Executive Director of BVI Finance immediately to replace Mr. Malone. Mr. Johnson comes with industry experience, having worked with the Financial Services Commission. To ensure a smooth transition and in recognition with the close association between the FSDA unit and BVI Finance, Mr. Malone and Mr. Johnson will share office spaces for the next few months as the unit staffs up its operation. I take this opportunity to congratulate both Mr. Malone and Mr. Johnson and to thank them for taking on these important roles at such a critical time for our financial services industry. Let me close off my remarks by reminding you of my government's commitment to this industry that directly accounts for over 60% of government revenue, and upwards of 80% of indirect sources are included. My government's commitment to this industry is firm and unwavering. I'm pleased at the bipartisan manner in which it has developed in the territory, and trust that this will continue as we move to implement the recommendations of the Financial Services Consultancy report. Solving the issues at hand is vital to the future and longevity of our financial services industry and the livelihood of our community. It will require all of us, public and private sectors, government and opposition, local and expatriate practitioners, local and international stakeholders, and the entire BVI community to work together to build a brighter and sustainable future for the Virgin Islands. Let me end by thanking all of those who have participated in this process. Most of them are listed at the end of the report you will receive. Let me now introduce Mr. Malone and invite him to say a few words, after which we'll have a question and answer session. Mr. Malone is no stranger to us or to public service. He returned to the territory in November 2014 to take up the role of the Executive Director of BVI Finance after serving 5 years as the Director of the BVI London office. My cabinet felt that his vast experience and talents would best serve the territory by heading the unit, and he has agreed to do so. Mr. Malone is also a former Director of Tourism, former Film Commissioner, and former Deputy Secretary in the then Chief Minister's office. He was a senior lecturer in marketing at H. Lively South Community College, chaired the BVI Chamber of Commerce and Hotel Association, and has chaired a number of national commemorative celebrations in the territory. His early career included 12 years with the IBM Corporation in New York in management, marketing, and systems. He holds an MBA from the Strickland School of Business, Barrett College of the University of New York. As you can see, he's very well qualified. I now invite him to give some remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Premier, and good morning, members of the press, members of the Steering Committee. Premier, let me thank you once again for this opportunity to serve the territory in such an important capacity. As I always do when you call on me, I commit to give you 100% of my effort and energy in the best interest of the British Virgin Islands. This is a very significant project for the government. There's a substantial commitment made, and Premier, I want to congratulate you for your commitment to the industry, and having worked with you over the past 5 years in London and the past 5 months here in BVI, I want to commend you for your leadership in getting us through what have been some very difficult periods and interesting challenges. This initiative is a significant step for BVI. I don't think I need to remind you of the challenges that the industry faces. And if we as BVI landers and those of us who live here want to continue to enjoy the benefits of financial services and the quality of life that it has brought us, we're all going to have to make significant changes. And as the Premier mentioned, we've started to make those changes at BVI IFC. The initiatives the Premier mentioned have all begun, and I have had the opportunity to sit in those committees with the various sponsors, and I'm sure they can update you on where those situations are. The delivery unit itself is essentially the nerve center of this entire operation. I think when you have an opportunity to look at the offices, it will essentially look like a war room, where all of the initiatives will be tracked, monitored, and we will have the opportunity to see at any given time where each of those initiatives are. The unit is the essential role of the unit is to sort of spread the gospel about the needs, the changes that have been identified, to continue to work with the sponsors on the proposals that they will put forward to be implemented. The unit will oversee and direct the monitoring mechanism, working with senior officials within government to make sure that the officers within the various departments and the senior management connect to the initiatives that are being proposed. And that will be done, of course, with the support of the Cabinet. The unit is also to ensure that there's accountability to Cabinet for what has been agreed, and to provide analytical support and recommendation to the various departments to make sure that the proposed changes are delivered and delivered on time. We have already begun the work. We are currently recruiting staff for the delivery unit. If you look in this week's paper, you'll see an ad for essentially 5 persons, 2 persons who are known as delivery specialists, who are responsible for coordinating the work and defining and analyzing and researching the initiatives to ensure that they are meeting the objective and that they're in line with what Cabinet is seeking to do. There'll be a data analyst position also being advertised, who essentially is an economist who makes sure that these changes are all in line and in the best interest of the economic development of the territory. And that will be supplemented by a communication specialist and an administrator and myself. So if you know anyone who's interested in being part of a very interesting dynamic organization, please ask them to look in the Beacon, the Island Sun, and to look at the HR website and make their application. We've had some preliminary interesting discussions with some of the committees, in particularly the committee dealing with the engaging the population, which is responsible for communicating this initiative to the public. And I think from the initial discussions we have, there are some exciting, interesting programs that will be coming, you'll be hearing about shortly, including the official launch of this initiative. As the Premier mentioned, this is an initiative that affects the entire community, so there will be an event planned for early June, which will involve the entire community of the BVI and give everyone the opportunity to participate and speak with the sponsors and speak with the Premier further about this initiative. It also includes setting up a special microsite where the public can get information, see what's happening with the initiative, and a lot of other interesting activities are being planned to make sure that the community gets engaged, that everyone has the opportunity to participate and to give feedback. And this is not just a one-way process, it's a two-way communication process, so the mechanisms for communication will be there. It will involve members of the community communicating with the wider BVI community, both locally and internationally. So I'm sure you'll have questions. I'd like to end by congratulating Mr. Julian Johnson. I'll try my best to give you a good start, and we'll be sharing offices, and not sharing offices, sharing premises over at BVI Finance, and we'll look forward to working with you to continue to help BVI Finance achieve what it needs to do to help the government and the territory succeed and stay where we are on financial services. So, Premier, thank you very much again for the opportunity. I look forward to continuing to work with you and the government and with the sponsors, and certainly we're happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Sean Rose, JTV News. Can we begin by, first of all, giving a differentiation between the unit just set up and the functions of BVI Finance, so that the public can get a good appreciation of what are the different functions of both organizations, so to speak?
Sure. Well, BVI Finance is responsible for the marketing, promotion of the jurisdiction, for defending its reputation, and to ensure that BVI is represented globally. And it is the face of BVI Finance. The implementation unit is looking across the entire industry and to some degree across the entire territory to see how BVI's position in the financial services can be expanded, how we can diversify. So it's looking at all of the supporting services, the FSC, the IFC, infrastructure, new business initiatives. So it's a much broader remit that includes BVI Finance. And I think to some degree a lot of the initiatives at some point will be integrated into BVI Finance because it will always be the face of the industry. So it's a much broader remit than BVI Finance.
And coming out of the McKinsey report, what are some of the main challenges you see, or the major shifts in the way financial services is managed, conducted now, that would be required, that the territory would see, that persons in the industry would experience, if any at all?
It's okay. What I would expect, for example, is that there'll be a more collaborative effort between the private sector and government going forward in the financial services industry. We expect that there'll be some improvements in specific subsectors within the financial services industry as well. We recognize that in order for the BVI to continue to be a destination of choice, not just for tourists, but for people who want to use our structures, we have to be up to date. We have to make sure that our regulatory system is par excellence, this would be a word, that it meets with the requirements of the clients in the global landscape. And in order to do this, you have to have a very close relationship with the industry itself, who's actually doing the work, the BVI, the government itself. And there needs to be some strong links between the industry and the government of the Virgin Islands in respect to how we evolve in terms of a regulatory regime and the laws, etc. So that's what we expect going forward. I don't know if the PS has anything you want to...
Yeah, I think if you listen closely to what the Premier said in terms of the key initiatives that we're pursuing, those things in effect highlight the key changes that we expect to see in the industry. In fact, the key recommendations coming out of there. I mean, if you just pick one, for example, the infrastructure. We know that the infrastructure in the BVI has to be developed significantly, especially the telecommunications infrastructure, to be able to support growth in our financial services industry in a number of areas. And I think, interestingly, while we have proposed to pursue some 10 key initiatives to try to move us in the right direction as it relates to financial services, they're going to have a positive impact on other industries within the BVI. Also, if we improve the infrastructure as it relates to the telecommunication industry, it's going to touch almost every other industry in the BVI. If we reform our immigration procedures and practices to bring them in line with best practice, to make sure that we're able to have the right talent in the BVI to support industries, it's going to help other industries. So I think if you think about any of the key initiatives that we identified, and that's why we decided to pursue those initially, it will bring some material change and have positive impact on the BVI overall.
Good morning, Jason Smith from the Beacon newspaper. My question is, my first question is simple. It's with regard to timeline on some of these initiatives. When do you expect them to bear fruit, and what's the implementation timeline like?
The implementation timeline is yesterday. We expect that there are some things that we're going to be able to do fairly quickly. We like to refer to the low-hanging fruit. And there are things that we can do. For example, in the immigration reform, just an improvement and streamlining of processes. These are things that I think can happen fairly quickly. But if we go back to things like the infrastructure, obviously that's going to require a long-term and solid partnership with some of the people in those infrastructural subsectors. We hope that probably within a few months, we're going to be able to see some changes. I know, for example, on the enhancement of the FSC service, there's a lot of things already in train that probably would reveal themselves in a couple of months. Where there is process and service improvement, we expect that those can happen quickly within a few months. But then obviously there are other things that's going to take a long time. I think some of the other initiative sponsors though might be able to provide some input on where they are with their initiatives and more specific timelines.
Certainly.
Just to say, the issue of engaging the population is critical. In addition to what has been said, the population, in addition to understanding the importance of financial services, not just the fact that it contributes 60 cents out of every dollar to government revenue or the 80 cents indirectly, but really understanding how it impacts their daily lives, and therefore they should buy into the campaign and support the initiatives. That is very critical. And we have had several meetings. I think, as Kedrick Malone said, the head of the implementation unit just said, we will be launching our campaign for that in early June. And just before that, there will be a number of things that will happen, including inviting college students, in fact, the general population, to participate in a competition for a slogan for financial services and so on. So those things will happen. And as the Permanent Secretary to the Premier mentioned, in terms of the Financial Services Institute, the restructuring of that to really build a capability locally is critical, and that process has certainly started. Teaching teachers to better teach financial services to our secondary school students, that has also started. So it's ongoing, and as has been said, we'll go after the low-hanging fruit, and it's going to take some time. I think one of the things that we need to point out also, I think it's fair to say, Mr. Malone, that the implementation unit is not a permanent part of government. It's to implement. So in 2 years, I would say it will go away as the various areas get dovetailed or what have you into existing services. So it is not that another entity is being superimposed on government. This is for a function, and once it's finished implementing, it will move away. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. As has been mentioned by the Premier, I have been given the responsibility of sponsoring the committee dealing with immigration and labor reform. And this is quite an important area. And it is one which I would hasten to add immediately is not just applicable to financial services, but is applicable to every sector of the economy. So the work which that committee has been doing, and we've already embarked upon our work, we've had several meetings, will, once the recommendations have been made and ultimately approved by Cabinet and implemented, would have an effect on all sectors of the economy, not just in relation to financial services. In the work of the committee, we have been looking at a number of broad areas. Particularly, we are looking at the practice and procedures that are currently in place in relation to labor and immigration, and more specifically at the application processes that exist there and other application processes that relate to a person who is coming into the territory and will be seeking seeking employment or working in the territory. The view, of course, is to ultimately streamline these processes, to simplify them, to make the processes perhaps accessible through the electronically, so that applications can be made electronically, and also ultimately, and most importantly, to reduce the time lag that it takes in relation to processing applications, whether it be first applications or renewal applications. Underpinning all of this ultimately is going to be questions of policy in their broadest sense, and some more specific and targeted policy considerations, which would be a matter of recommendation by the committee, but ultimately, of course, this is a matter for Cabinet's decision. And of course, we foresee that with some of these recommendations, there will be the necessity to have changes in the legislation and perhaps some of the regulations that are already in place. So the committee itself is a fairly broad-based committee. We have a membership that consists not only of persons in the financial services industry, but from other sectors of the economy, so that we have the views and of persons in other important sectors of the economy being brought to bear on our deliberations and ultimately to be incorporated into the recommendations which we would make. There's a lot of work to be done in this particular area, but we have set ourselves a target date of mid-June with a view to making a report or making our report to the Honorable Premier and ultimately to Cabinet. There's been mention of low-hanging fruit as an expression which seems to be very popular these days. I kind of like it myself, actually. And we are anticipating that in the interim, we'll be able to make recommendations on a number of issues that can be followed through and implemented within a short term. Some work has already been embarked upon by government in a number of these areas prior to this initiative, and we have had the opportunity to look at that work and to benefit from it in our deliberations. So we anticipate that some of these things would be implemented in a fairly short period of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry. I guess my next question is for Dr. Smith. You know, I have some specific financial services questions as well, but this is just broader. Given the diversification of financial services in the short term is going to call for essentially more development. It's going to call for more work permits, it's going to call for more work permits and more development generally. Has there been a discussion held internally about how much development you're seeking for the British Virgin Islands?
Interesting. We are aware that right now, given the kind of economy we have, that is financial services and tourism, that there has to be considerable infrastructure development to catch up to where we need to be. You know, this is why we are concentrating now on fixing our roads. That's important. This is why we're concentrating on improving our telecommunication systems. This is why we have been seeking for some time, for example, to have a major hotel business type, particularly on the island of Tortola. And this is why we are speaking about expanding our airport. And so, and we are a long way from completing all that. We're still, working on those issues. So, and there's a lot to do yet before we can say, okay, enough is enough. But those are the primary things which we're focused on at the moment. Those are the things we have to sustain both the industries we're on and help us to be able to broaden those industries.
Thank you. But is there a population target you're looking for? Is there a GDP target you're looking for? I mean, in 10 years from now, what would you like to see? Is the model another Cayman Islands? Is it a Singapore? I mean, what is the end goal?
The end goal actually is to develop an economy that would be to the benefit of all the people who live in the British Virgin Islands. And we have discussed and will be initiating very soon the whole idea of a population policy that you spoke about. We had a discussion about that just this week, actually, and that is something we have to really work on and produce. We, for example, long ago, done work on the work study to see what the demands of labor is in the territory. Again, this is something that we have to repeat. And this is going to be sort of something we done very early in this year. So that the labor demands and the population policy, these will be done. I have them as priority in the next few months. And they will help to determine the kind of development, the kind of infrastructure needs that we have to work on.
Thank you.
I'm not sure who would answer. Permit me to sit, please. But in 2008, you had some 430 registered companies offering various services. Now, we recognize the challenges after the financial meltdown. In 2015, what's required in terms of diversifying the BVI financial services sector? And what are some of the new services you might be offering?
This is the reason for engaging the firm McKinsey in the first place, because we recognize the challenges and the fact that financial services as they are now will change. And we have to be ready for that change. And so we engage the firm McKinsey to have a broad look at where we are and where we need to be. And what is being identified essentially is that we need to broaden what we offer as far as financial services is concerned. We need to have what is popularly called added value to our financial services. We at the moment have, as you said, 485,000 companies, right? And that's our core business, company formation, which companies use in transnational businesses, right? But we want to be able to broaden what we do, deepen what we do, and add more value. For example, we need to concentrate more. We concentrate more on like mutual funds. We do have some of that, but not nearly enough. We are sort of way second place to places like Cayman as far as mutual funds are concerned. Captive insurance, trusts, insolvency, arbitration, cash management accounts. Those are new added value in common. Mortgage-backed securities, index funds. There's a whole range of added value activities that we want to get into. In order to do that, this is one of the reasons why we have to look at our policies, because in order to do that, we have to identify persons who are experts in the particular area and invite them to come and set up these things for us. And this is why we have to have a labor and immigration policy that allows this to happen readily, that we're able to build industry in that way. This is why we are concentrating on improving the Financial Services Institute, so that even as we have to invite experts to initiate these activities, the Financial Institute has to be bolstered to be able to train BVI landers to be able, so because we have to have a long-term view of the financial services area. And that institute is important in getting BVI Islanders up to date and trained for that. As well as, of course, making sure that our students, when they go to study, also study in areas that relate to the financial services industry. For example, accountancy is one of the big areas that we need to concentrate on.
Please, let us discuss for a bit the point raised by Permanent Secretary Broderick Penn as it relates to the requirements to improve the communications technology services. In 2008, 430,000 companies, and back then you didn't have LTE begging to be launched, you didn't have this new upgrade by Lime. What's required specifically from the communication services area now?
Essentially, we need a telecommunications sector that allows us to compete seamlessly from the British Virgin Islands in the rest of the world. And we're not clear on the specifics of what that is yet, but we know, for instance, there'll be an increase in bandwidth, for example, that should be available to everyone. There's the issue of reliability, making sure the systems are always working. So it's not just in respect to the telecommunications alone, but there's also the power side as well. So you need to make sure that if you have a business in the British Virgin Islands, you need to be able to communicate seamlessly and continuously with anyone in the rest of the world, quickly. And that is the basis of how we've been going forward with telecommunications, with the infrastructure initiative. Telecommunications actually is the biggest piece of that initiative. There are other issues we need to deal with too. There's a basic infrastructure in the country. Roads, water, sewage, you need to be able to get to the BVI, that's the airport. Those are basic things that we need to do. But the most probably critical one for us right now is to being able to just participate in the rest of the world through our telecommunications gateways in a seamless, reliable, and quick, efficient manner.
I had a question on the International Tax Administration Authority. I can't remember, but the unit that is responsible for sharing tax information. Is that unit fully up and running? And I mean, what is the status of the negotiations on to get off the blacklist imposed by France?
Thank you, Jason. That actually is my question. It's the International Tax Authority, and the mandate is to share information with the rest of our treaty partners around the world. And it's a bit deeper than that. They also advise on policy in respect to the same. To answer the specific question, which I know everybody wants to hear about the French blacklist, what I can say is that we, on a technical level, the French are very pleased with us. I can't advise you on the other level that we need to get to in order to get off the list, which is a political level. But out of about 119 requests that we've had thus far, we've answered about 116 completely, and we're in the process of answering the others. So that's in the 95 percentile. So the International Tax Authority is fully operational. It is evolving because responsibilities are increasing almost daily. There's FATCA, which we launched the FATCA portal last week on the 15th. That is up and running and being used. There's things that are coming on stream, the Common Reporting Standard, which we are actually preparing for to be able to deal with in an efficient manner. So that unit really is to deal with the information exchange, but also as well to advise the government on policies in respect to the same.
Thank you. Other question I had was, and I didn't see in the report that the Premier had laid on the table of the House of Assembly earlier this year, I didn't see mention made of the Arbitration Act and the emerging arbitration center that's being created. I was hoping somebody could give me an update on that and explain where that fits into the broader financial services picture.
Yeah, arbitration clearly is one of those new value-added services that we've been pursuing, and we've clearly been pursuing it even before this initiative. Going back to the base of companies that we have here in the BVI, we expect that there's going to be a number of matters involving those companies that would likely require arbitration. So we see BVI in a unique position to be able to create an industry around an existing industry that we have that could well do. It's moved on. The act has been passed. There's a task force, if you will, largely involving the Financial Services Commission that has a responsibility for moving it forward. There's been some developments in terms of finding physical space to actually create an administrative unit center around arbitration. And I think that there's some plans in the works for market in the jurisdiction as a center. So it's not dead. It's moving. We believe we are already in a good place. And we expect that, in the next few months and so forth, you'll probably hear more about that. But it's certainly one of the value-added areas that we're expecting to move on quickly and push heavily.
Thank you.
My name is Johan Earl. I'm from Virgin Islands News Online. The First Lady mentioned that the implementation unit is meant to be a temporary mechanism. So at the end of maybe that 2-year period, what's going to happen to you, Mr. Malone?
Let me just take that from Ms. Malone. Mr. Malone is on contract with the government to, right now, head up the unit, and it's a 2-year contract, right? He's not at the moment a civil servant in the sense that the permanent secretary or the financial secretary are civil servants, right? And so, but as we come to the end of that period, we would of course have developed the areas that we are looking into now, and I'm sure that there will be further need for Mr. Malone's involvement.
Just have 2 more questions for you, I swear. One is, I was just looking for an update on national risk assessment, which I know is due to be finished soon.
I'm afraid I can't give you too many details on that at the moment. We're still very much in the process. Okay. And the manager director of the FSC would have been better able to give us an update on that, but so I think we have to pass on that one this morning. Sure. And as soon as we have a clearer picture of where we are at the moment, I'll be able to. In fact, we can have a discussion about it at some point.
Thank you. The only other question I had was, given the scope of everything that I'm hearing the government is trying to do, is there a sense of how many millions of dollars this is going to cost? I mean, is there a sense of how much resources needs to be committed to make these changes happen?
Are you speaking about changes in financial services or generally?
Changes in financial services.
Oh.
The creation of the delivery unit, the diversification initiatives, the McKinsey study, the collective total of what you're trying to do.
I can give you a figure, to be frank. During the course of the discussion, there were some figures that were bantered around, but those were rough figures. We haven't actually done a good estimate as to the overall cost. But I do know that we can't worry about the cost. We have to look more importantly at what it would cost to not do this. And what it would cost to not do this is effectively the livelihood of the BVI. What we've committed in terms of the delivery unit is likely probably going to be less than $1 million a year. Okay. So that's an administrative arm of the implementation. But I think the most important point to take away from this is that we can't afford to not do it.
We have time for one more.
Just a quick follow-up on that. How much in terms of the annual value, remind the Virgin Islands, the territory stands to lose should you not be able to implement all of these requirements and ensure that you keep the industry afloat?
That is a more difficult question because the industry, as it operates in the BVI, has a specific area in which we operate. Core business is the company formation. So, and we expect that to continue. Of course, there are the challenges that have been imposed by the international pressures, but we must respond to those challenges. And we have been responding, we'll continue to respond. So we'll continue to promote the BVI as a very important, significant financial services jurisdiction, a good place to do business. And so far, the interest in the use of BVI as a financial services center has not wavered. In fact, it continues. But we still see the need to broaden and deepen the services that we offer. That could be good for us. Speaking specifically about the monies in the budget, for example, for setting up the unit, we have about $500,000 right now in the budget for this year and next year to set up the unit and get it on its way.
I was responding to Sean's comment in terms of how much we have to lose if we don't invest. I think that's what you were asking. Reminding you and reminding the public that as the Premier and I think others said, It's really 60% of our budget and 80% of the broader community in terms of financial services contribution if we don't, fix it or make sure that it continues to be thriving and sustainable, as the report is called.
I think, if I may just add something to that, I think we all have to recognize that our starting point is that we have already a well-established financial services industry, one that is world-renowned and well-recognized. And we are certainly one of the world leaders in relation to financial services, albeit that our emphasis has been on for company formations and incorporations thus far. And there's been attempts, of course, to diversify in the past with varying degrees of success. And part of the whole underpinning of this initiative is recognizing the challenges that we face at the moment, recognizing the challenges we are likely to face going forward. How best do we reposition the BVI to ensure that we can deal with those challenges and we can sustain the industry going forward and continue to be a world leader in terms of the industry? And that is really what underpins this entire initiative. And the initiative itself has involved very heavily consultation with the industry players in the BVI and even outside of the BVI for their input as to the areas in which they see that there are concerns or the areas in which they would like to see us diversify and improve the industry going forward. So the McKinsey report takes into account those views of the industry in a broad sense, and those views underpin the recommendations that are in the report. The 10 issues, the 10 initiatives which the Honorable Premier has mentioned that have been recommended in the report are top priority initiatives. There were some 40 initiatives that were identified, and there will be, I foresee, some necessity going forward to consider some of those other recommendations that constituted the 40 initiatives. But these are the top 10 priority things that we must do and do now in order to reposition ourselves going forward as an industry.
I'd just like to wrap up by saying that from the time we came into office in 2012, we began this initiative of looking at where we need to position ourselves in the financial services rather than just sitting back and letting it happen, because we recognize the challenges, and so we set about doing that. We've had several meetings and consultations, but this study we done recently is the one that comprehensively looked at everything, including all the studies that were done previously in the past 2 years. And we think this will, if we sort of follow this guide, we'll be well on the way to sort of reposition ourselves, adding value to what we do here, and therefore helping to maintain the industry. What we need really is, and what we have been doing, is having good cooperation from the industry as we sought to do this. The meetings which we had with the McKinsey included many people from the industry who gave considerable input to this document that we now have before us, right? And so what we need going forward is to continue that work between the industry and the government, because we're both in this thing together. And we also need the cooperation of everybody in the community, cooperation with the media. I think we also see the media as partners in this process going forward, because as you sort of portray to the rest of the world that BVI continues to be a highly regulated and highly regarded financial services jurisdiction, that could only mean good for the British Virgin Islands. Thank you very much.